Looks like we are live. One note of housekeeping before we really jump in and get started. The Q&A on the event is being watched, so if you have questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A, and we'll answer them as they come in. And we'll have the time for some questions at the end of the conversation as well. So I want to get started by asking a question. So how many of you have thought about how are you going to back up your BC data? How are you going to have that archive that we all know we need of our financial data, that annual, monthly snapshots that we like to have as IT folks, so we can look at the data they were at that point in time, or if we have a real crisis moment, we have it stored somewhere else. That's what we're going to look at today, and how Business Central has an answer, but really I kind of found that answer lacking. So UnlockDR solves that answer for us, and let's kind of jump into how it solves it and what we're going to do. So here's our agenda for the day. Really simple. We'll keep it short but informative, and hopefully we have some questions and we can answer some of those questions as well. But you can see our agenda. My favorite part, we're going to get a little bit nerdy and lift the hood, lift the cover off the engine and show you a little bit how it works at kind of a high level. Not much to demo here because it's largely a background process. So we will get started. So Business Central out-of-the-box backup, what does it give us? It gives us what I call a rolling 28 days of point-in-time backup. What do I mean by a rolling 28 days? That means that kind of what it sounds like. Anytime in the last 28 days, I can request an environment to be restored to any point in time within the last 28 days. And according to the Microsoft documentation, they do that by they do a weekly full backup, a nightly differential backup, and then they do log backups every 10 minutes. So that's how they do their backup scheme to get that point in time restore within the last 28 days. Now, the advantage that they have is obviously they're in complete control of everything. So they have full view of everything that is going on. But we don't have access to those backups. Even though they're taking them, they don't give them to us. So if you want to restore within that 28 days, you go to the admin center and you say, I want to restore this environment at this point in time, and then you will be able to do that. So that's the automated backup that Microsoft provides. It is limited to that 28 days. They do have a manual process you can do. You can manually export the data. You can go in the admin center, and I think in the if you look at the environments, you can say, I want to export this database, and then it exports it to an Azure Storage Account. But that is a manual process. So those are the two out-of-the-box backup options that Microsoft gives us. I kind of thought that lacked, in my opinion, because I've worked in IT and software development long enough to know that, we like to have a regular snapshot of our data, and some people have regulatory compliances they have to comply to, and internal IT data retention policies, those kinds of things. A rolling 28 days, yes, I know if you never delete the data out of Business Central, you still have it, let's say 7 years later. Sure, but that's assuming we never delete the data or nobody accidentally deletes the data. It can happen, and it can be a challenge. Well, actually, if it was old enough, it would be very difficult to recover from. So that's the long-term archive that I like to see. Is I want to be able to go back in time and see what did my data look like at this point in time. But also, what about upgrades? And I don't think Microsoft is going to do an upgrade such that it would require you to redo your books for historical months. But every time that you do an upgrade, you are technically changing your historical data. Because if you add a column or you add business logic or things like that, you're you kind of have to modify the data some to match what the new feature is. So again, I like to have that point in time where I can say, okay, yeah, I know it looks like this now, but when we actually processed this thing inside of Business Central, what did it look like 2 years ago? I like to have those points and times, but I'm kind of a data nerd at the same time. So that's my preference. And finally, if somebody sadly decides to move away from Business Central, you lose the data. You don't, now you could do your manual export like I mentioned, so then you can keep your data, but you don't have access to that data if you don't have a license. So if you did move away from BC and you didn't do an export, you would have to maintain one license of BC to maintain access to that data. So we have the automated backup from Microsoft. We can do a manual backup, but as you know, to me, there's just some things that I didn't like. And so how does UnlockDR solve that gap? Well, first, we automated that backup. We automated that export. So there's that manual export, like I mentioned. We automated that process to export it to an Azure Storage Account. This has a couple of advantages. It exports the entire database. So when we were researching how are we going to solve this backup problem, there are a couple of solutions out there, and most of them use the API. And the problem with the API is it doesn't include all the fields and it doesn't include all the tables. So you can do custom APIs where you add the fields and you add the tables. But then when BC is upgraded twice a year or monthly, as it sometimes is, and fields and tables are added, you need to go make sure that those are added to your backup routine. And so you kind of create your own, I'm not going to call it a nightmare because it's not absolutely terrible, but your own regular maintenance you have to do to make sure that you're actually backing up all of your data. Doing the export, we get every table in the database for all the companies in the environment, all in one file. It's the entire database backup. So that's why one of the reasons I really like this solution is it gives me everything in one place. And then we save it to a cold Azure Storage Account. And we selected cold because it's the cheapest storage, and quite honestly, we shouldn't be pulling data out of there. So we put it in there, and I think with cold storage, if I remember correctly, they expect a file added to cold storage to be there for 180 days, which in theory we shouldn't pull the data out of backup or archive, once we have it in there. The other thing that UnlockDR gives us full access to all those backups. So if we do want to restore and examine what the data looks like at that point in time, we have that capability. You have full access to all the backups that are taken. So that's another advantage of that UnlockDR gives us. As far as security goes, we did secure that cold storage account inside of an Azure virtual network. So the only resources in Azure that can reach that cold storage account have to be inside of that Azure virtual network. So that gives us another layer of security that we have. And then when it comes to backup, when I've run IT shops in the past, we have our backups in one location, but we always have them copied over to another geographic location, just in case of like a real disaster. You have things in two completely different places. So when you install UnlockDR, you have the option of all of the Azure geographic redundancy layers I think layers is the right word, but you have all the options of geographic redundancy available to you. Just know that the more redundant you make it, the costs do go up. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. The costs do go up. I haven't memorized the cost chart of the redundancies, but just something to consider when you're selecting how you want to back it up. So we have we have a backup now, and we have archives now that we can access. So how do we actually restore it? Because that's the real big question: is how do we restore something? So we really have two options. The first option and the easiest option is you can restore this to an Azure SQL instance, because it is basically just a database backup. So we can just grab that file and point it to an Azure SQL instance and have it restore it. The second option, if you really truly need a Business Central environment, it is possible to restore it to an Azure SQL instance, and then Business Central has an import that is meant to be for going from BC on-premise to BC in the cloud. So it's basically you use that import method for Business Central. Now there's a caveat to that. I imagine that works really well when you're on the same version as online or relatively close. If you wanted to try and restore backup from 2 years ago, that might get a little bit more iffy on how that restore is going to go. But quite honestly, if I'm restoring something from 2 years ago, I'm doing something like I want to look up data for an audit, or I want to we need to run some reports over the last X number of years or something like that, and we want to restore maybe a few of the snapshots or something. And those instances, really restoring to an Azure SQL instance is going to work just fine. So those are the two options we have, and I guess I'll leave it at that. So let's get a little bit nerdy. This is the part I like. So I want to point out a little bit how this whole process works. So we have two sections. We have the part that lives inside of your tenant, and I mentioned this earlier. It's one of the advantages that we have is we made the very intentional decision in our architecture to make sure that as much as possible, we have as little access to this data. And the process runs inside of your tenant. All of the credentials are stored inside of a key vault inside of your tenant. And all of the data is stored inside of your tenant. So as far as TruNorth is concerned, we, unless we add ourselves to this private Azure network, we really have no access to these backups. They're 100% controlled by you. And the other advantage is we've really reduced the threat landscape. So when we looked at how we want to architect this, we looked at other solutions, and we've used other solutions ourselves. And you can see how if we had the process running over here, because this is what a lot of them do, is they have their backup running in another tenant somewhere. They have all their processes running. And so a lot of them even store the data in another Azure tenant. But if we have our application running here, and it's connecting over here and doing the backup routines, that means this one account has access to potentially hundreds or hopefully someday thousands of instances of Business Central and backups. If that one account is compromised, that's a very risky situation. So we wanted to reduce that threat landscape as much as possible. And really the only thing that has access to run the backup and access to the cold storage account is this app service right here. So this app service, again, it's in your tenant. You do have the ability to make changes to it or control it. It's if you're an admin in your tenant, you can do those things. But or was I going? Oh yeah. Well, the last reason that it's that this is important to point out is we actually had to decide that we're making it harder for ourselves, because the one advantage of having all of the processes running over here is when we want to make updates, or we have to push out a hot fix or a bug fix, it's really easy because we're in 100% control of everything. In this scenario, we made it harder for ourselves because we now have to push out an update to n number of client environments, because that's how we wanted to do it. we understand it made it a little bit harder for us, but again, it reduced that threat landscape, because if an account in here is compromised, it impacts this. It doesn't impact hundreds of other people. So it was a very intentional decision for us, and I'm actually very pleased with how it worked out. So enough being really nerdy. So let's get a little bit less nerdy. You can see that we do store some things, and I just want to cover really quick, what does TruNorth store? And you can see what we store. We store configuration and we store history. We do not store any credentials. We don't store, BC or the storage accounts or the key vaults. We don't have those credentials stored in our tenant anywhere. They are all inside of that key vault that is inside of your tenant. So that again reduces that threat landscape, and the configuration and history is information that would be available to almost anybody if they were to do some simple queries in Azure. So none of this is private or what I would consider a security risk, that if it was somehow retrieved from our instance of Dataverse, it really wouldn't do anybody any good. So so where are we going with this? Right now we have an archive that is storing data, right? So our roadmap right now is we want to implement what is called just-in-time access. So what we have currently is a managed application inside of the Azure Marketplace. You can go out to the Azure Marketplace and subscribe to it right now. It gets charged to your Azure subscription. But there's an option in there that we want to enable, because as the partner who is publishing the managed app, we have full access to those resources, and we're not 100% comfortable with that. So we want to, again, further reduce our access to your tenant, and again, making it more difficult for us to actually push out updates. But just-in-time access means anytime anybody at TruNorth needs to touch these resources, you would get a request, and then you would have to approve that request and actually set a time frame for how long we can access those things. So again, further reducing that threat landscape, because that was really important to us, because this is, financial data is sensitive data. We wanted to be very, very careful with it. And then the next thing we're going to work on is automating that SQL restore. So we've done it with a proof of concept, so we know this is possible. And we just need to get it fully automated, and fully automated in a way that is secure and well, anyway, just always works. I'm going to say it that way because I cannot remember the word I was going to say. But we're going to automate the SQL restore, and one of the key features we're going to add there is in our customer portal, you'll be able to enter the credentials, like the accounts, just the account name, not the credential, not the full credentials, but just the account names that should have access to that restored instance. So what'll happen is it'll drop that database, it'll restore the new one, and then set up permissions. So anything that you have connecting to it will connect to it just like it was before. So that'll be a nice feature to have. And then the last one, and I'm not going to guarantee this one. I'm going to go on the record saying I'm not guaranteeing this one, but we want to explore the potential of it, because it would be really nice if we could say, here, I have a backup from 6 months ago, 7 months ago, and I just want to restore it, and then click a button and it restores it. That would be amazing. Again, I'm not 100% confident we can do it, but I want to give it a really good try. Where that will get really sticky, like I said earlier, is if you have a backup from, say, 2 years ago, that might not be possible, but we'll see. I want to really give it a try. So that's where we're going with this in the near future, and then we'll just keep adding features over time as we get ideas from people. And then to answer everybody's question, So how much does it cost? Right now, we have an introductory price or introduction price of $250 a month. So what do you get for that? You get the automated backup process. It will monitor the process or we will monitor the process for failures, because remember, we have that history coming to us. So we will be alerted if there's if a process fails. You'll get updates to the archive process. You'll get support for the archive process itself. And then you have full access to those archives and backups. So what are the next steps? What do we do next? So if you want, you can click that link. That will take you out to the listing inside of the Azure Marketplace, and you can go ahead and install it from there. We will send you instructions. So there are some kind of technical things you have to do, setting up some credentials and filling in some values inside of the Key Vault and so on. I'm going to caveat the go ahead and install it. And I'm going to warn you, right now we're working with Microsoft on the fact that the deployments fail. And it's 100% Microsoft's fault, because the error currently resides between the app service that is deployed and a storage account that is in the background that the marketplace owns. It's nothing to do with anything we've done, and they know that. They've said that. Their teams are researching it, but we haven't gotten a resolution yet. So when you go to install it, it will fail the first time. If you click the redeploy button, it might work the second time. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but it will almost always work the third time. And then it'll be installed, and then you can go through the rest of the setup steps. But if you want, we can go ahead and install it for you, and we can go through all those steps and take care of it. If you just reach out to our client success team, they can get you set up with that, and we can do it for you. So with that, I wanted to leave time for questions. So I guess any questions that have come up?
We don't have any questions in the Q&A.
All right. Well, not
but
having
I will
any
put
questions.
The client success email in the chat just in case.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. Well, with that, we can, if nobody has questions, I guess we'll call it a webinar. And thank you. And keep your eyes out. We do have some more products coming in the unlock space that we're pretty excited to bring to market. So keep an eye out for those announcements coming from us. And we'll call it a meeting.